concerned. But we begin our program this morning by talking about social cohesion, tongue-tied in the morning. In July, we all know South Africa celebrates Madiba's legacy. We call it Mandela Month. But what most people often neglect and forget is that July is also Social Cohesion Month. This morning we tackle the subject of social cohesion and ask what needs to be done to move South Africa forward. Now, we've asked this question a number of times and we've had a number of answers, which on the face of it, prima facie, they appear to be solutions that will actually solve the problem. But then again, we still remain where we were when we first asked the question. But that doesn't mean we will stop asking the question. That actually means we must continue asking the question until we get the answer. So, joining me now to give us some perspective is Pierre Heistein, hoping I'm breathing that correctly, convener of UCT's Applied Economics for Smart Decision Making course. And he joins us to talk to us about just that. Good morning to you, sir, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning.
Now, we'll take a break and come back. And when we come back and find out exactly what the secret is. If there's a secret, perhaps if we have a solution, what the solution is to this problem of social cohesion in South Africa, or shall I say, lack thereof.
Morning Talk on SAfm.
All right, let's synchronize our watches. By the time it's 12 after 9. Now let's get into the subject of the day. When we speak of social cohesion, is this something that can be achieved, Pierre, or is it something that we always try to achieve but is almost a utopian state of being?
I think it certainly is something we can achieve. But we spend a lot of time talking about the problems of social cohesion, so racism, xenophobia, inequality, etc. And I think what we really need to define is what we're aiming for when we talk about solving social cohesion or solving the problems of social cohesion. You know, what is our ideal of South Africa? What is our end goal? For me, that is a lack of exclusion. You know, I think we are a multicultural society, and we should really embrace that. I don't think we should try and aim to all be one single culture that mixes and we neglect our special magic that we each bring to the table. But what we absolutely cannot do is exclude anyone from any opportunity simply because of their race or their culture. And I think that, for me, that utopian society is where everyone has equal opportunity, but yet brings with them their cultural uniqueness.
When we speak of social cohesion, and I'm listening to you suggesting let me change what I was going to say, because people have said what you're saying right now. It is not something new that we all need to put together all the diversity. Hence, we have this unity in diversity, but that hasn't helped thus far. So, what exactly is new?
No, it certainly hasn't. And one of the main problems behind that is that it's a systemic problem, and that is that we're kicking the can down the road. And so there's a pervasive attitude that it's somebody else's problem. And what we need to realize is that in order to have the South Africa we want, nobody can have the South Africa that they want. Every single one of us has to adapt to our ideal. We all have a different idea of what a utopian society is. There is no universal concept in that. And we all have to accept that we will not be able to achieve what we specifically want. And I see too much of that. I see a lot of people struggling to come to terms with the fact that they're going to have to adapt themselves, either their culture, either their family, their circles, but most importantly them themselves. You know, how every single one of us is going to have to sacrifice something from our lives in order to achieve that. And that is one of the greatest challenges. So yes, there are and we must certainly get on to kind of the economic policy behind it, the social policy, what can be done from outside, things that can be implemented. But I think as a first base starting point, we all have to accept that we're going to have to adjust our own ideals in order to achieve this.
And we are going to do this how? What is that needs to be done that we haven't done yet? We've held conferences, we've had concerts, we've had speeches delivered, we've had people talking on the same platform with different colors of the rainbow on the platform. What needs to be done that hasn't been done yet?
more conversation. So and when I say conversation, I don't mean talking. So the examples you've used are all fantastic ways of putting this issue on the stage and making people realize that it is a problem, but most importantly that we are prepared to address it. And I think a lot of these initiatives are doing wonderful work in bringing it to light and putting it on the front of the list of things that need to be sorted out. But what it's lacking is true valuable interaction between people of completely different backgrounds. And unfortunately in South Africa today, whether deliberately or not, we still have a lot of structures that separate us from people different to us. And we may pass them in the street every day, we may work with them, we may sometimes even go as far as socializing with them. But how often do we ask hard-hitting questions of them from a one-to-one basis on an individual level? Now, what's your life like? What are your challenges? You take, for instance, the debate around the Rhodes statue. And while there was a lot of noise, a lot of debate, and a lot of conflict, what it did, it brought to light sentiments and feelings of people that had not been discussed before. And I think, at least with a lot of people I spoke, a lot of people sat back and went, wow, I've been studying, working, sometimes even living with that person for years, and I had no idea that was important to them, that really hurt for that. And I'm talking on both sides of the race line now.
All right.
Yeah.
I want to open the lines for you because this conversation is better handled with South Africans, but not just one person. 0891 104 207, 0891 104 207. Please send your text messages to 34701. We're talking social cohesion and seeing if there is something that needs to be done. Is there something that we haven't done? In fact, is social cohesion a possibility or a dream, an imagination, something that is never going to be, a utopia? 0891 104 207. Let's go to the lines. Go to Cape Town. Janus, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Naye. Instead of talking about the social cohesion, we should talk about social collision, because, we don't experience anything like cohesion in our country. My point is that political party, when they go and we elect them for their function, very often, very quickly, they forget about us, and then they care more about small group of the leaders on the top than the rest of the country, and the people they promised, do the best, the better life for all, and other nonsenses which many parties they promise to us. We've got the best constitution in our country, but still 21 years later we cannot win. The fact is that actually the political parties' leadership don't give a damn about us, They will talk about using big words about education, all of this 21 years later. Come on, guys, what we did, we could do much better. So instead of talking about cohesion, let's talk about the collision, where the many people like my brothers and sisters who have to be forced to leave the country because they are white and they cannot find the jobs in here.
Got it. Janus, I hear you. Thank you very much. Collision, not cohesion. Okay. Let's go to Nasha in Cape Town. Good morning, Nasha.
Morning, Alex.
Well, thank you, Nasha. How are you?
Yeah, I want to say that the real problem is not about functions or the events that have been done. The real problem lies within education system, that we do not know self. So if we could begin by defining who we are first before we could start to think about social cohesion, and then we would start to begin to have the better understanding of who we are as a people. From that, we would say we have begun to talk about social cohesion.
Okay, I'm not quite sure if I got what Nasha was saying there. Let's go to Abby in Mitchell's Plain. Good morning.
How are you?
Abby. Well, thank you, Abby. Go ahead.
We've got the dilemma in South Africa, because we're speaking about unemployment and what have you. But we're still following the same system. For instance, I think I'm so glad with so that with the BRICS thing, maybe we can get something from this, because it's good to have economic ties and friendly relationship with the countries. Colonial powers like Britain, France, America, Germany, in fact, these countries hold no good in for us. Not at all. The country is still controlled by these people. In fact, they invaded our land. They still got our country. We're still living like cockroaches together. So it's high time that we follow another route. Maybe we can get more employment if we get engaged more with China, India, and even Russia, and even Southern. Because these people are liars. Plain liars, because they're forever going to hold us in bondage. And it's time that we move free from people. These people like to put sanctions on other people like Mr. Mugabe and what have you.
Abby?
Yes, sir?
Are we still talking social cohesion in South Africa?
Yes, no, definitely. It boils down to this. Because I can assure you this. Look in Greece. Greece is in problem now. What are South Africa to do with Greece? You mark my words, not long, they're going to tell us our money can further be devalued because of Greece. What we got to do?
Yes, sir? Are we still talking social cohesion in South Africa?
Yes, most definitely. Because why? This is collision caused this, and this entails all of this, and it's high time that we follow another course. It's many chances and decades that we've been all bondage by these terrorists of the world, and it's high time that we follow another route.
All right, thank you very much, Abby. All right, Nasha and Abby have lost me totally. Perhaps you understand what they're talking about here?
Yeah, if I can just address them one by one. I mean, first of all, let's just stop and listen to the diversity of accents coming through there. And I think we've got huge challenges when it comes to social cohesion, but to say that we have no social cohesion, I think is to deny the magic that we do have in China. I mean, just fantastic to hear that. Regarding your first caller, government and the leadership from government and how the accusation that they care about small groups, we certainly need to ask government to do a lot more. There's some fantastic work being done, and there's also some terrible work being done, and we must not stop being as demanding as we are of government. However, we also cannot rely on them to sort out the problem, and we cannot look at government as a separate entity to society. We are all governments of something, whether that be our close colleagues at work, whether that be in an entire company, whether that just be our group of friends, our neighborhood, our block in the neighborhood, or even our families. We are all governments of something. And we need to ask ourselves, first of all, are we not just looking after small groups? Do we as ourselves, as our own personal governments, not also have our little groups that we look after? And are those groups diverse enough at the moment? Are we, in our own tiny little circles, aiding social cohesion, which is something that does happen in certain areas, others not. But I think as soon as we try and accuse government of something, we need to make sure we're not doing it ourselves on a smaller scale.
When you say what? Okay, go ahead. Would
you prefer to address each point individually, or shall I talk about the other callers?
No, that's all right. That's all right. Go ahead, Pierre. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Addressing Nasha, I believe what he was getting at was saying that we need to define who we are first, which ties in quite strongly with what Abby was saying, in that in searching for solutions and in searching for our path out of this, our South African path out of a South African problem, we need to be South Africans. And I think there are very valid points in saying we have a lot to learn from the rest of the world. I think Abby's point about our integration to BRICS is fantastic. However, we must be very careful, obviously, to say, well, we would like to be like Russia. Last week, Russia released a straight flag, so a flag specifically for straight people in direct defiance of gay marriage. I mean, that is a terrible example. These countries certainly aren't. No one has it figured out, and we certainly shouldn't copy them. But we as South Africans need to turn to who we are and find out what is our culture, what is our solution, what are we? Can we draw from the rest of the world? Is a different integration? And also, what kind of leadership are we following? I think South Africa up until now has followed a very Western-style leadership, both in politics and economics. And that is not necessarily a problem, but we need to diversify the kinds of influences and external educations that are affecting how we make decisions. So we need to call both West, both East, from all around the world, but mostly from within ourselves. And I think those are great comments in terms of how we can find a path out of this.
Initially, when we started talking, you spoke about how we have institutions that separate us. My question is it institutions that separate us? You're talking about a government and leadership, and yet South Africa does not live its life or her life based on what government says. When you go to anywhere of the suburbs or localities where people live, government is not there. There's people there. South Africans like you and me. You're marveling at the variety of accents here, and yet we don't marvel at the variety of accents when we're in the very same queue at the bank. We don't marvel at the variety of colors and cultures when we're at the very same supermarket, when we're at the road flipping fingers at each other, when we're living in communities with gated roads and high walls. Government has nothing to do with what we do when we're in the privacy of our own homes, cars, and environments. How then do we blame our lack of cohesion on government and the institutions, and yet this is perpetuated by us?
Well, I think there are it certainly is a bit of both. I do agree with you absolutely that government is simply a produce of our society. It's not like they fell out of the sky or came from some different planet. If all our government leaders are South Africans, and perhaps with a few exceptions of background in between, but this is our society that's leading us, and we produce them, and we need to take responsibility for that, both the good, responsibility and credit, both for the good and the bad. But there are certain institutional barriers that we need to address, and Nasha mentioned education at the beginning. Education is a huge one. Until somebody's education is not dependent on their income levels, we cannot expect South Africa to break the cycle of endemic or systematic poverty. If you're born poor and therefore cannot get an education, chances are you're going to stay poor. And so we ingrain these separations in South African society, and that absolutely cannot carry on. Our education and possibly even our health system need to be addressed almost as a situation of emergency, because these institutions certainly are putting barriers to social cohesion in South Africa.
Let me throw one at you again, Pierre, because I'm noticing that you're not responding to it. On the road, nobody knows how educated I am. As I drive my car and you drive your car, when you flip a finger at me or when I flip a finger at you, education has nothing to do with it. My question is, why is there lack of cohesion even on the road, where all road users using cars together in the very same direction, the N1? Why should we be so violent? Why should we be so incoherent one with the other? Why should there be such stark hostilities amongst the people? Put aside the education. Even if we're in the very same league as far as education, you have your post-grad, I've got my post-grad, you're driving your German vehicle, I drive my German vehicle. Still, we have people flicking fingers and wanting to crash into each other. Remember the story of this man who was driving a Porsche, who got out of his car and beat the daylights out of the other driver? Where is social cohesion there?
That's a fantastic point. And on one hand, we mustn't confuse education with titles as well, or academic levels and knowledge and mathematics and science. Education also includes understanding of each other. And there's some fantastic studies on showing how the world, on average, has become more peaceful over the last 200 years, or the last 1,000 years. And largely, in terms of murder rates, in terms of violent deaths, etc. And the conclusion that is drawn from these is that society has evolved along a path of empathy. So at first, thousands of years ago, we couldn't relate to the tribe next to us, maybe a few kilometers away. We didn't see them as similar, the same race, the same human being, the same being, and therefore we could not empathize with them, and that makes it so much easier to be violent. As society's progressed, we have made huge milestones, and are still making milestones on seeing the other as us. Now that is now, you can see that as racism, South Africa took a huge step with that Nelson Mandela led, as well as many others, seeing other races as actually we're all human beings here.
All right.
And as we build that empathy we are able to see, I mean, it's very rare that a human being is blatantly violent to somebody they consider to be their own. And that kind of empathy needs to be encouraged, needs to be taught, and needs to be valued so that we actually recognize violent acts as violent acts.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. Pierre Heistein, convener